Hello everyone, and welcome to the Climate Ambassadors podcast, where we discuss the current impact of climate change on everyday life, how to enhance climate resilience among our populations, and how to prepare young people to lead change in their communities. My name is Laura Lorente, Communications Coordinator at EucA, and today I am delighted to be joined by climate expert Ms. Katriona McGlade, a fellow at the Ecologic Institute in Berlin. Katriona, thank you very much for being here. Could you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and your field of research?
Hello, of course, and thank you for the invitation to join you. My name is Katriona McGlade and I work at Ecologic Institute. We are a think tank and research institute working on all aspects of European environmental policy, and we're based in Berlin. And I'm a fellow here at the Institute, and I've been working here since 2010. So 16 years already. I specialise in the area of climate change adaptation. So whereas the mitigation side is looking at how to reduce carbon emissions, the adaptation side is looking at what do we do once we know that we have climate change, and what can we do to address the effects that we are seeing. And I'm really interested in all aspects of the question of adaptation. So I look at coastal areas, flooding, looking at heat risks in urban centres. But the cross-cutting theme for me, and the thing that I am most interested in, is the question of justice and social justice in particular, thinking about how different groups are affected by these decisions that we make about the way in which we want to adapt to climate change. Because climate change doesn't affect everyone equally. So we also need to think about the ways in which policies might be able to address those inequalities and certainly ensure that they don't exacerbate inequalities. So I'm really happy to be here today to share the expertise that I can with young Europeans, especially those who are concerned about climate change, which is something that we should all be concerned about. But trying to give some ideas and hopefully some hope that we can all, pull together and everybody can do their bit to improve the situation. I think especially when we're thinking about building resilience within communities, it's a case of really trying to build alliances and work together to find the best solutions to tackle climate change.
Thank you very much for your introduction, and thank you again for taking the time to be here with us. The following questions are forwarded by a university student from the EucA network, Anita Privat. Anita is a political science student at UC Leuven in Belgium.
Hello, my name is Anita and I live in Belgium in Louvain-la-Neuve, and I go to the Université Catholique de Louvain in Belgium, and I study political science. As a young student in Belgium, I don't feel very informed about how the flooding affects the climate in Belgium, and so I had a few questions for an expert. How does climate change influence flooding events in Europe and Belgium? And do you think climate change is making extreme rainfall and flooding more common in Belgium, and why?
Thank you for that question. So I think there's no doubt that climate change is no longer something which scientists are predicting about the future in Europe. It's something that's very present. We see it all around us, and every year across the media we're seeing headlines about drought, about wildfires, extreme heat, especially in urban areas, but also huge flooding. And what we see is that this isn't just about weather. This is really climatic. So in Northern Europe, for example, we're accustomed to a certain level of rain and of flooding and coastal erosion, and these kind of things are sort of part of our climate vocabulary in Northern Europe, while in places like Spain, northern parts of Africa, people are very accustomed to dealing with heat and drought, and they've adapted their agricultural systems and ways of living around those things. We can think about ideas about siesta, so people really avoiding that that midday heat. But what we're seeing now is this kind of shift where people are, they may be prepared for these pre-existing climates that they have always lived in, but now, in Northern Europe, we're having to think about what does it mean to have a tropical night where it's, maybe doesn't go below 20 degrees when you're in bed and unable to sleep, and therefore have an unproductive work day the next day. And equally in southern areas of Europe, where perhaps the drainage infrastructure isn't able to cope with high levels of rain in a short space of time. We can see the consequences across Europe. We've had some huge flooding episodes, both in terms of coastal flooding, with Storm Cynthia, for example, 2010 in France. We've seen examples in Valencia. We've had flooding in the German Eifel region, Netherlands and Belgium, and these have all had really severe economic and social consequences. So I think the message has arrived loud and clear in Europe that climate change is happening and that flooding can have create really severe damages. What we need to understand is, of course, that while climate change is a driver and a risk factor, there are all sorts of other structural ways in which we live that increase the ways in which flooding is experienced. So, we have much more important infrastructure now that can be damaged. So therefore the economic losses are increased. So our road infrastructure, our rail infrastructure, large settlements at the coast that weren't there, a few hundred years ago. And so those kind of social and human dimensions are part of the reason which climate change is experienced in a particular way.
Why is it important for young people to learn about flood risks and climate resilience?
So why should young people be thinking about climate resilience? I think it's something which everybody needs to think about, not just young people. It sounds like something that politicians and scientists should be worrying about, but actually it's something that everybody needs to think about. And climate resilience comes from the day-to-day decisions that we're making, whether it's when you're putting a flower in your window box or in your garden, choosing that kind of local variety, something which is a native species, so that attracts native pollinators and supports biodiversity in your region. Those kind of actions, taking those on an individual level, choosing to eat local fruit and vegetables, choosing to engage with your communities, because it's not just about these sort of supposedly environmental actions, it's also about building those networks of resilience. How do we connect with one another? How do we think about a future which connects generations in a way that's socially just? How can we support each other in networks so that when there is a heat wave, when there is a flood, how can we make sure that we have those contacts and we know who the people are who live nearby who might need that extra help? It's as simple as talking to our neighbours. Those kind of actions can really make a difference when it comes to those extreme weather events that we are going to be experiencing more and more. So it's not just something for young people, it's for everyone to think about, and to really consider what can we do to make our lives well in the future. It's not only about fighting climate change, but also thinking about what positive activities can we undertake to help ourselves now and moving forward to a positive future.
Thank you very much, Katriona, for your thoughtful answers. And thank you, Anita, for your interesting questions that are so relevant for today's youth. Thank you also, and of course, to everyone listening. We hope that you enjoyed this time with us. Stay tuned for the next podcast episode of Climate Ambassadors, a project co-founded by the European Union that is building climate preparedness. See you in the next one.